online gambling in particular can be such a huge revenue raiser? Our next guest seems to think so. Professor John Kindt is professor of business and legal policy at the University of Illinois. He joins us on the phone right now. Professor, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Glenn. Thanks for having us from icy Illinois.
Yeah, it's going to be icy all over the place, isn't it, here, John, these next few days? Now, why do you think it would be so bad if gambling were legalized? Because I'm thinking you take the mafia element out, you take a lot of the criminal element out if it's legalized, because then it's all out on the table, right?
Well, these issues have been coming up for years and years. And back in the 1990s, we had the U.S. National Gambling Impact Study Commission, and it basically said that there are a lot of negatives associated with this and that the costs are at least $3 to the taxpayers for every $1 in benefits. And now we've got Barney Frank and the House Financial Services Committee proposing the next speculative bubble. They weren't satisfied with being largely responsible for the subprime crisis. Now they're proposing deregulating, well, they say they're going to regulate it, gambling on the Internet.
Right.
Well, the National Commission said you've got to prohibit it. It doesn't work. You can't regulate it. And we just have a new red flag report out of the University of Illinois, 3,000 pages, 3 volumes, which says the same thing, says it's even worse. And we've had 7 years of congressional hearings on this before we passed the 2006 Unlawful Internet Gambling Enforcement Act, which gave increased enforcement authority to the banking industry, U.S. Justice Department, and other enforcement mechanisms.
But, sir, you have people, professionals, like Annie Duke, Poker Players Alliance spokesperson. She testified in front of the House Judicial hearing on online gambling. She is for it. This could actually be a fairly decent revenue raiser for our states as well. I mean, so you have the poker community behind this.
Well, you know, poker is not the name of the game here. What we're talking about is gambling at every work desk, in every living room, and at every school desk. And young people are already showing double the gambling addiction rate that the older generation has evidenced. The National Gambling Impact Study Commission, the new 2009 United States International Gambling Report, hundreds of pages on this, years of testimony from the Justice Department and otherwise say it just doesn't work. It's going to create huge social and economic costs.
So that's where your costs are, because that was my next question. Is the cost in regulating now, if it becomes legal, or is the cost in after the fact, almost from a health standpoint, trying to get these people who are addicted to gambling off gambling or out of financial difficulty because of the issues they've had?
Well, yeah, good points. I mean, the National Gambling Impact Study Commission, which had a lot of pro-gambling people on it, including members from casinos, indicated that you can't regulate this Internet gambling. You have to prohibit it and keep the prohibitions in place. And that's because the mechanisms for getting around the laws that we already have are, I mean, we're talking entrepreneurial groups that are already trying to thwart what's going on here. Mm-hmm. We're really not talking about poker. We're talking about electronic gambling. That's 90% of the revenues that we're talking about here. And we've seen reports on 60 Minutes and elsewhere where people are being cheated in Internet gambling. And people need to remember that it's the official position of the Justice Department as well as the FBI that gambling on the Internet is illegal. Gambling in cyberspace is illegal. And there are over 30 countries that also have bans on gambling in cyberspace, gambling on the Internet, because they recognize that what we're talking about is true. But you did raise one. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish your thoughts, sir.
No, you raised a great point about the lobbying that's going on. Spencer Baucus,
right, the
ranking member of the House Financial Services Committee, has been complaining about a $100 million lobbying campaign to get this legalized. Now, if this is an illegal activity, where is this $100 million coming from? And people also ought to ask, people like to gamble ought to ask, if they're being treated fairly. Who's regulating these slot machines as well as the electronic gambling that's going on already? People who like to gamble, are they being treated fairly? We need to have congressional hearings on consumer product safety. Bobby Rush's committee needs to hold hearings on this.
Sir, clearly our congressional leaders are seeing dollar signs. They think they can make money off of this. That's why I think they're pushing this to go forward as well. But there is an argument to be made that it's a little bit like socialism. You're basically telling me I can't make a decision myself to make wise decisions about gambling, so you're just going to prohibit it from me altogether.
Go ahead and do your around-the-table type of gambling. We're talking table games. Nobody cares about that. We're talking about electronic gambling, which is 90% of the revenues that the world is talking about when they're talking about gambling on the Internet. This is known as the crack cocaine of creating new addicted gamblers. You're going to have new addicted gamblers in doubling. It's like drug addiction. Bankruptcies go up 18 to 42% in areas which have this type of gambling. Crime goes up 10% per year. The taxpayer costs are enormous. The National Gambling Impact Study Commission, the new United States International Gambling Report, have reviewed all this. Believe me, I could make a whole lot of money if I were to simply say that this will work.
Right.
There are plenty of lobbyists out there. That $100 million, where's it coming from for this illegal activity? There are several of us academics who make a lot of money arguing the other side of the issue. But we don't, because the national statistics, the national reports indicate this isn't going to work. It'd be great if it would work.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what will work is that if you roll back the video gambling machines we already have, the electronic slots machines, you would be dumping another $100 billion into the economy. That's $300 billion to $500 billion in economic multiplier effect. That would be pump priming the economy. Gambling shrinks the economy. It takes money out of the consumer economy.
Yeah,
we need people spending money on consumer goods.
I can tell you,
grow the economy.
It took plenty of money out of my pocket when I was in college, and I decided that was it. Thank you, Professor Kindt. Good to see you, all right?
Right, thanks.
All right, Professor John Kindt, business and legal policy professor.